My name is Katie. There's probably attendees who haven't seen me here before. I've started working in Bio since October as admin officer. So I'll basically hosting the webinar and just introducing Lynda. But before I say that, I just want to say thanks to everybody. You know, these are the member support is really important to us in Bio. We're very grateful with it. So, you know, for it. So without that, you know, we wouldn't be able to have, say, webinars like this. So we do appreciate that. Then just a little bit on Lynda. She's recognised on a national and international level for her work in swift conservation in Ireland, which she's been working on since 2011, I think is right, Lynda. And you set up the Swift Conservation Mayo, which conducted the first Irish worldwide countrywide, Swift nest site and subsequent nest box projects at schools and other public buildings throughout Mayo. So the Swift Conservation Ireland Community Forum and website provide a central resource for information and advice on best practice for swift conservation across Ireland. And it is a voluntary organisation formed really to help swifts, providing people with knowledge and information on how to identify and help them. So it's looking like a very interesting talk. So with that, I'll hand over to Lynda and she'll share her screen now.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie, for that introduction.
No problem.
And I'll share my screen and hopefully all will go well. So I like to share screen and share entire screen. Okay, so. Is that showing okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. I can see that.
Lovely. Okay. So just first of all, thank you to everyone for attending this evening. And I'm just really going to share with you some information about the Swifts and some information on projects. And as Katie mentioned, the work that I do is voluntary, and what I aim to do is really share with people the formula that I use to help get Swifts into nest box projects. And my beginnings were at ATU Mayo, where I was working in administration, and we set up the nest boxes in 2011 and got our first interest in the boxes in 2012, which was very quick, and it's turned into quite a big project. And you'll see a little bit of video there showing some of the activity that we have in our initial 12 nest compartments. We ended up, we now have 18 nest compartments, and it's quite an active and well-established colony. So that project has really, well, when I set up that project as part of the Green Campus at ATU, I thought that was really all I was doing. But in fact, Swifts can be very addictive, and also it is possible to help them and become part of the Swift community. So I've been to several international Swift conferences, presented at them, and also we had a student, Jarek Majkusiak, who did his master's degree on the Swifts in ATU in Mayo, and he's also presented his work at 2 conferences. It also led to to a BT Young Scientist project, and they got 3 awards in the 2025 BT Young Scientist, and it's actually quite influenced the way those students think about the environment. And one of them is going on to study biology and ecology. So I'm very delighted about how Swifts can help influence young people. So the apologies to anybody that knows a lot of this, but I think I'd like to come from the point of just giving you all the information possible, and hopefully there'll be some things that you'll find interesting and beneficial. So it's a red listed bird of conservation concern in Ireland and the UK. Although it's red listed, it doesn't have full protection, in that it's fully protected once it's here and nesting, But outside of the breeding season, the nests do not have full protection, which is quite an issue really, because the swifts nest in the same location for life. They come to Ireland to breed, so the breeders, the birds that have an established nest site, they arrive around mid-April, and they're now staying, some of them, into early September. So because of the live streaming we have at ATU and the established colony and other projects with cameras, we can see that some birds now are staying longer to breed. So we've had chicks in nests up until the first week of September. So that's kind of an extension on what was considered the traditional breeding period. They are totally faithful to their nest site and to their partner, sort of, although if the partner doesn't return, then they will take up with it with another bird. And when I say their partner not returning, what happens with swifts is that when they have finished breeding and they leave the nest site, the birds leave separately. They don't migrate together. So they're only actually together during the breeding season, and for the rest of the year when they're on migration, they're kind of free spirits. And so they meet up again for the following breeding season. So they spend the rest of the year, when they leave Ireland, they go down to Southern Africa, but they don't breed there. So really, I consider here as their home, because where where they're breeding, where they're rearing their young, this has really got to be the future of the species, and I think we have a very important role to play. So there is a problem for swifts. There has been a big decline. It's estimated to be somewhere around 40–50% decline, but because there've been no surveys of nest sites, it's all really down to just observing from observation of birds numbers in flight. So there's no doubt at all that there has been a big decline in UK and in Ireland, and most of that, I believe, is linked to destruction of nest sites when buildings are renovated or destroyed, and because the nest sites of swifts had not been recorded, it's actually quite easy to not be aware that you have swifts breeding in a building and to block off the nest sites, and lo and behold, you've got homeless birds. And when swifts lose their home, it can actually take them a few years to find a replacement home. And it could be that they will die before they'll ever find a replacement home to start breeding again. So you can see how the combination of losing the home and losing those years of breeding can actually somehow cause that population decline. So yeah, the replacing of the fascia and soffit actually is one of the very quick jobs that can be done on a building, and can really be quite catastrophic in losing nest sites. So the good news is that we can actually all help swifts. There is just a formula really for success. We can try and protect the natural sites, the buildings where they're nesting, that they've found nest sites themselves, but that's a little bit tricky. But setting up nest box projects, be they externally mounted or built in, is really works. So I'll just step back a bit now and just explain the difference between these species, because I do find that some people get confused about swifts, swallows and martins. So the swift is a hidden nester, so that means you won't see the nest. They enter the building through a little nook or cranny, and the nest is just a bowl of grass and feathers, and we just don't see it, and they don't leave a mess. So if people are trying to tell me that they have swifts nesting in their building, and then they tell me about all the droppings underneath, the nest site, I'm alerted to the fact that it probably isn't swifts. So swallows and martins, they're part of the hirundine family, and the swift is not related to them at all. The swift is more related to hummingbirds or nightjars. So the hirundines, the swallows and the house martins, they both make mud nests. And the swallow makes its mud nest in outbuildings, whereas the house martin makes its mud nest on the outside of buildings, and it looks more like a coconut that's stuck up under the eaves of the house, and there's just one little entrance hole. The swallow's mud nest in the outbuilding is more like a half of a cup, and you can see the chicks lined up on the edge of the nest when, you know, when they're kind of big enough, whereas you kind of rarely see the house martin chicks. The swallow has the longer tail streamers, it has the brown throat, whereas the house martin has a kind of white belly and it has that white band on the back. So they're quite easy to tell apart. And then the sand martin, they are sort of similar to the house martin, but they don't have the white band on the back, and they tend to nest in colonies in riverside banks, sometimes in walls of buildings, in even in Ireland in the bog as well. They'll nest in turf walls. But what you'll see about the hirundines is that they've all got white bellies. The swift does not. The only bit of white that the swift has is a little patch on the throat, and most of the time when they're flying, that white patch under the throat is not visible. So then we in Ireland, we're actually in a quite important location for the swifts. We're in the western edge of their breeding range. And where I'm located in Mayo, we really are quite on the western edge. The bottom map showing the red band is the breeding range of this common swift. And but right over into China, it's a subspecies called Pekinensis. But all of the swifts that breed in that red band, they all go to southern Africa, and the Pekinensis and the common swift that we have, they will cross over in southern Africa. And there has been some attempted research to try and find out whether actually the two species would cross and breed, but there's no specific answer to that question yet. And on the right-hand map, you'll see the path that the swifts take to get down to Africa. So they tend to go over West Africa, so they're not going the fastest route down over the Sahara. They're actually following food source, because they're flying 24 hours a day. Once they've left the nest site, they're not going to land in Africa, they're going to be flying. And so they need to follow where there's good food. And they spend quite a lot of time in the Congo. Now, the swift that's marked on that map went down to Mozambique, but we do know that they go down to Zimbabwe, South Africa, and so on. The way they gathered this information was the BTO caught breeding swifts, and they fixed these data loggers. So data loggers are not GPSs, they're just a little chip that was fitted on the birds. This was a bird actually in Micheál Casey's colony in Tubbercurry, not far from where I am. And so what happens is that they have to recatch the bird the following year to download the information off that data logger. And it wears the data logger like a harness, so like a rucksack. So they have a cord that goes around the wing. So that's how, up until now, they've been gathering information on the migration route. So I've put a couple of videos here just because when the swifts and the swallows and martins are here in Ireland, we tend not to think about the life that they have away from here. So this is actually a video of swallows in Kruger National Park in February last year. There are thousands of swallows, barn swallows, our European barn swallows, that go to Southern Africa, and they go in a big communal roost down in Natal, but they don't breed there. So they're going there for the food source. And as you can see, you know, walking amongst zebras, and then a few weeks later, they're actually in Ireland flying amongst the cattle. So this other video is common swifts in Namibia, that I videoed in November 2022. And what's happening there is that they go down into Southern Africa when it's the kind of wet season, and there's a lot of insects hatching. So these swifts were flying low over the trees, and there was a hatch of termites. So that's the other life of the birds. But of course, then they come here, and they're coming here to breed. And this would be the sort of traditional, what I call the traditional sites where they nest. And a lot of it's in our stone buildings. They will, on the bottom photo, where I've marked with a yellow arrow, you can see, just make out a groove in the stonework where swifts have been going into this nest site for at least 100 years, and it's worn a path in the stonework. So it's quite amazing. This photo was taken at ATU and in Castlebar, at the natural nest sites there, and that building dates back to the 1800s. The top left is a Kinloch Castle, and there is a peregrine falcon pair that nests at that castle, and there's about 12 swifts that nest there, and we don't find any swift feathers under the peregrine nest, so I think he's not trying to feed on the swifts. So churches are another. Stone churches often have good swift colonies. That one there is Foxford, and there's now over 20 pairs nesting at that church. So they live a life almost permanently on the wing when they're not at their nest site. They only land in the nest site to breed. So they're feeding on the wing, they drink on the wing, and they mate on the wing, although they do also mate in the nest site. They don't perch on branches or wires, and so, you know, if you see photos of swifts perched on branches or so on, that I'm afraid they're not genuine. They collect their nest material on the wing, and they're collecting grass, willow, catkins, feathers, and sadly, more and more, they're finding little bits of plastic. And this is a video from the project in ATU in Castlebar, which I hope is going to play for me. Okay, yeah, so you see the adult bird has brought in a little shard of plastic. I'll just run it back a tiny bit, and it tries to, don't know quite why this video is not playing properly, but it tries to stick the plastic down into the nest form, because what the swifts do when they're building the nest is they glue all the nest material together with their saliva. So yeah, oh, here we go. So you can just see the vibration of the head, and that's where it's generating saliva to try and stick the plastic down into the nest. And this is not just happening in Ireland, it's happening across Europe, and there's a Spanish student that was doing some research and gathering data on that. They weigh, an adult swift will weigh 40 grams. So when that's the weight of a Cadbury's cream egg. So when we are rehabilitating swifts, you know, we sometimes get chicks that fall out of natural nests, and there's no way of putting them back, so they have to be rehabilitated. And we always go by the indicator of getting them to be 40 grams at release weight. We can get them over that weight to get them fit and well, but then we don't want them to be much over 40 grams for fledging, because when you're overweight and too fat, you can't take off properly. So kind of 40 grams is about the magic weight that we're looking for. So this is just to show you the foot of the Swift. So they don't have all their claws are forward facing. So they don't have a claw that would help them grip onto a branch, which is why they can't cling onto branches. They can hang off vertical surfaces. And I've seen them hanging off building walls near natural nest sites, and they've got a phenomenal grip. So they've got a very strong grip, and it allows them to hang vertically, but they just don't have the formation of the claws to allow them to perch. So as I was mentioning, they're sleeping on the wings. So what happens is there was a Swedish chap did some research. He was working for the Air Force in Sweden, and with radar, they were able to see swifts going up to about 3,000 meters to sleep at night and coming down again a couple of times in the night and going up again. So they kind of go up in a group, and we'll see this in usually around July, August time. Groups of swifts will be gathering at dusk, and you'll hear them screaming and socializing, and they'll suddenly go higher and higher, and then they'll kind of disappear. What I find here in Castlebar at the ATU project is they bring in a lot of the purple moorgrass, which is quite long, and they do like to wrap that round to form their kind of nest, their nest form, which will keep the eggs in a safe place. There's no mess, as I've mentioned. So this is another place, a natural nest site in Claremorris in County Mayo, and we found 3 natural nests. There were no droppings on the ground whatsoever, and nobody had any idea that the swifts were nesting there until we did a survey. And the swifts go in and out so fast that often people just do not even notice them. And this is the reason why, and hopefully this video will play for me. Whoops, okay. Maybe not. Yeah, okay. So this adult has just fed the chicks, and now it's cleaning the nest box. So they actually eat the droppings. So the chicks will turn round and they'll do their droppings off the edge of the nest so that their nest remains clean. And then the adult will clean inside the nest boxes and eat the droppings. So that's obviously a little of additional nutrition for them. When swifts are just talking about nutrition, when swifts are laying eggs, they only lay an egg once every other day, and they'll lay a maximum of 3 eggs. So they lay an egg, then they have a day's break where they build up their resources again, and then they'll lay the next egg. So they feed on insects, and that's what's really valuable and important, to keep a healthy environment, to not use insecticides. In Germany, they're having a bit of a crisis because of the amount of herbicides and pesticides used for agriculture. We're quite lucky in Ireland at the moment. We have some use of pesticides and insecticides, but we also have a lot of bog, which generates a lot of midges, and that's an excellent food source for the swifts. So they collect insects in their throat. So many birds you'll often see swallows or other insect feeding birds. They'll feed like 1 insect almost at a time to the young. But what swifts do is they'll collect about 500 small insects in the throat, creating a bolus, this kind of ball in the throat. And that is the one time that will help you when you're surveying for swift nest sites. If you see an adult swift flying and you can see the white throat, that usually means it's got a bolus inside, and that means it's feeding young. So that's a good indicator that that bird is breeding somewhere nearby, and it can help you try and locate the nest site. And then interestingly, when the adult takes the food in for the young, the chick opens its mouth really wide and puts it over the adult's head. And I think I have a video of that here. So you'll see these are two quite well-grown chicks, and the adult is going to come in to feed them. And you can see what a terrifying experience it is for the adults. The chick virtually, you know, attacked them. They opened their beak really wide, and usually the adults are pretty controlled and they can make sure each chick gets a portion of food. But the chicks never seem to feel as if they have had enough, and beg for more. You can see that one there saying, where's more? I want more. Okay, so just some facts, really important facts about the breeding. So the young ones, they start breeding when they're about 2 or 3 years old. So when they come back from Africa that first summer, they fledge and then they go to Africa and they come back that first year. They do a lot of socializing and looking to see where they might nest, and that's what's all the screening groups that you get for swifts. But they don't breed in the first year, and even if they might go into a nest site, a potential nest site, they very rarely breed until they're 3 years old. Because what they do is they identify a nest site, and they might start taking a little bit of nest material in, but then they have to find a mate, and then they've got to bond with that mate. So what they're doing between fledging and being 2 and 3 years old is they're pretty much flying non-stop. They're not really going to land within that time. As I mentioned, they're very faithful to their partner. James O'Neill actually has been doing some research with colour ringing swifts, and he's found that there is quite a bit of movement amongst colonies of swifts, in that they're not quite as faithful as we thought, because if a partner doesn't return in good time, the bird can get a bit, you know, thinking I better find somebody, and could take up with another bird. So they are faithful to the nest site and they're faithful to the partner, but obviously, as you would imagine, there's a little bit of flexibility in that. 2 or 3 eggs. When they're new breeders, they tend to lay 1 egg. 3 eggs would tend to be the experienced pairs. They can live to about 12 years old. We've had a couple of pairs in ATU that have reached 10, 11 years old. And you could actually see when they're experienced breeders, they come back, they're straight in, redo the nest up, and they get into the breeding very quickly. The incubation time is 3 weeks, but the fledging is 6 weeks. So that's twice as long as most other birds. And the reason is that it linked to the first point, which is that when the chicks fledge, they are going to fly. They have to fledge successfully, and they are going to be flying for 2 years before they land again. So they've got to be ultra fit and well developed. So I'll show you a little bit what happens in the nest box. But they, by the time they fledge, they have to be really strong birds. They've only got 1 chance to fledge successfully, so they must be ultra fit. And so because of that long period of incubation and fledging, they only have time to rear 1 clutch in a season. So doing nest site surveys is valuable. It can help protect natural nest sites, and you can find some advice on the swiftconservation.ie and on the Swift Conservation Ireland YouTube channel on how to survey. And if you do start to survey, I would encourage you to import the information in the Swift portal on the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And what is the most valuable record is of a nest site. You know, recording that you can see 5 birds in the sky has some value, but it's not as valuable as having the record of a natural nest site, along with a photo like this with the nest site marked on. that's really good and worthwhile. So the surveying can help provide natural nest sites. This is one chapel that was converted into a doctor's academy by NUIG, and they were re-roofing and everything, and we had 8 nest sites in total in this building, and we managed to protect 6 of them, but they added additional nest sites in there. So in the end, it was a better building for swifts and more secure. But we did have to have that initial information about where the swifts were nesting. So helping swifts, there's 2 types of nest box project, the external boxes or the built-in boxes, and I use woodcrete mostly. And the reason is that swifts are going to nest in a site for life. So you could be talking several generations are going to be nesting in that location. So you want somewhere that's going to withstand the wet Irish weather, and wooden boxes can often decay before the swifts have actually taken up residence, because when you set up a nest box project, you could be waiting 3, 4, 5 years. I've even got a project that it took 11 years for swifts to take up residence. So patience is the name of the game, and using good quality nest boxes is a good part of the formula. There is a company in Sligo now called Quick Crop, and they've started to sell the Woodstone, the Vivara Pro woodcrete boxes and the Schwegler woodcrete boxes. They're all made in Europe, so it's quite difficult to get them here, but thankfully Quick Crop are now selling them. There's another box that's new on the market, and it's polymer. This is made by Action for Swifts in the UK. And the good thing about this box is it's a moulded unit. It's got a sloping roof. The entrance hole size is good, but it's very light. It only weighs 1.5 kilos. If I go back to my woodcrete boxes, as you can imagine, they're quite heavy. So the Vivara GZ10 weighs 9 kilos. And the Schwegler, which has 3 compartments, that also weighs 9 kilos. So, you know, they're heavy boxes to put on a building. They're very well made, and the fastenings are extremely good, but you can't put them up with a ladder. You actually need to be very well prepared if you're going to install those. The nest box model at the top, the square brick, that's the one that's used, that I use for building into new buildings. It's like a cement block, but it's a little bit deeper, but it's an excellent box to use on buildings in Ireland, and I also would use the Schwegler 17A. The polymer box is a great project for home projects and any projects really, just the ease of installation, and they will send them to Ireland, and they do have prices in euros. So just giving a bit more detail about nest boxes, and I mentioned about the entrance hole size. That is very important. There are nest boxes on the market that have nest entrance holes that are too big for use here for swifts. So we want an entrance hole size that's 29 millimeters deep by about 65 wide. And we're talking millimeters, not centimeters. So the 29 millimeters is important because it stops starlings or prevents starlings from getting into the nest box. And I love starlings, but not in a swift nest box, because they are aggressive to swifts. They'll attack them, they'll ground them, and they'll take in nest material that's not suitable. Additionally, starlings will make a mess on the wall near where the nest box is. And most of my projects are on public buildings, on schools and so on. And it's very important for me to be able to say, you won't have any droppings, so there's no kind of, issue with that. Having a sloping roof on a box is useful because it stops birds like gulls or jackdaws from sitting on the box, but it's not always possible that. And if you have an overhang, you can use a flat roof box and tuck it up tight above. So, you know, there's uses in those different models of box depending on the location. The other thing that's important is that you should be at least 4 meters to 4.5 meters above, I could say ground level, but it's not just ground level. It's if you have an adjacent building attached to your building that has a flat roof, you still have to be 4.5 meters above that flat roof. And the reason that you need this height is because I've mentioned that when the swift chicks fledge, they only have one chance, and they have to launch themselves out of the nest site, swoop down, and then get lift. So a bit like somebody jumping off a cliff with a hang glider. So we need to give them the best chance possible to fledge successfully without being grounded. The other thing is that south facing is too hot, really. Even in Ireland, south facing can be too hot. So ideally, you want north or east facing. If you have to use south or west, then really you need to paint the boxes white, and you need them under eaves to give them as much shelter as possible, because you don't want chicks being in a nest box that's too hot. And the size of the nest, sorry, I'll just go back. The size of the nest box is also important. So this one here would be 32 wide, and then 15 high, 15.5 high, and 15.5 deep. So that's centimeters. To me, that's the minimum. And the Schwegler and the Vivara and the Action for Swifts, they all have that dimension. You will get some that are smaller, but I'm not keen on those, and this is why. The chicks spend the last 2 weeks exercising, so they have to spread their wings out. They have to be able to flap, to strengthen the chest muscles, and to do push-ups, because they are going to, they've only got that one chance to fledge. So they're trying to get as fit as possible. So you need to provide them with that space. And you could be talking 2 or 3 swifts in a nest box. You need room for that. And on top of that, every night the adults will go and sleep in the nest box with the young ones. So you could have, when the chicks are nearly fully grown, you could have 3 fully grown chicks and 2 adults. So you need the room for 5 fully grown swifts. So those measurements to me are very important, to make sure that you're giving the swifts a good size home, not a council house, but you know, like a flashy, the best you can give them. I just wanted to mention, because it's kind of linked to the Burren, this whole initiative of refarm that I've been working with Brendan Dunford on this, which is to work with farmers that are, I think a lot of the refarm farmers are organic, but farmers that are interested in biodiversity, on how they can help swifts and they can have swifts on their farm. So we did a few in 2025 as an experiment. One of them was this, the Daly's farm on Lockmask House. So they've got the Schwegler 17A tucked right up underneath the overhang of a barn, a stone barn, and you can see that they've got the good drop there. So on the right, the Glossary Organic Farm, that was the only wall that they had that was that had the height and the open aspect, so that the chicks have the open aspect to fly, but they didn't have an overhang. So we used here the GZ10, and we positioned the boxes so that there was enough room for the birds to maneuver, that we weren't having them colliding on flying in and out of the nest boxes. So you need to kind of think of a lot of things. And the other one with the Glossary, you'll notice that there's a small spotlight just above the door. So that spotlight is facing down, and it's okay, it's not right close to the boxes, but what you want to avoid is, you don't want a bright LED spotlight near the entrance to any nest box, because swifts will often enter a nest box or a nest site even when it's close to dark. So you don't want to obscure their view of how they're going to get in into their nest site. And equally, shining spotlights from the ground up onto a building, it can also hinder birds that want to fledge or leave a nest site. They can be blinded because of the light of this spotlight shining onto a building. So this to me is the long-term future for swifts. And this is what I'm concentrating my efforts on now, is to build nest boxes into new builds. And we now have several hundred of built-in nest boxes in County Mayo. Mayo County Council are on board in all their new public buildings. So we have here the Crossmalina Fire Station. If I know a new school is being built, I'll approach the principal once they've got planning, and I get the funding and I provide the boxes to schools, and the council provide the boxes when it's their building. So the top right box model in the Westport Town Hall, that's the Schwegler 17A, so that's the triple box. So that box has dual purpose. It can either be fitted to the outside of a building or can be built in. And then on the school and the fire station, that's the GZ3, the Vivara GZ3, that's like a cement block. It's really successful. This was the Castlebar Leisure Complex. We've got 23 built-in boxes at this pool, and in 2023, 21 of the 23 were occupied by swifts. So that is an amazing colony. But there's one key to every swift nest box project, and that is the attraction call. You have to play it. The swifts do not know what a nest box is, and also how are they going to find a hole that's 29 millimeters by 65 millimeters unless you help them. So what we're doing with an attraction call is we're pretending that there is an active colony already there. So the prospecting swifts, those 2-year-old, 3-year-old swifts that are looking for a home, they'll be drawn to the sound and they'll start looking in the holes near to the nest site. And peak boxes in the UK make a very good quality call system, and that system is now being sold by Quick Cropping County Sligo. You don't need a law license to play an attraction call to bring a bird to a nest site. So I'm just going to show you a bit of behaviour here. There would be a screaming sound, but I don't think it's going to play. But this is showing you prospecting swifts. This is at ATU in Castlebar, the natural nest site. And here are birds that are following birds that have a nest there, and they are investigating what the possibility is for them to find a nest site in that area. So if you see that behaviour at a building, it either means that there is an active colony there, or that there was and the nest sites have been blocked off. So the ATU project in Castlebar, it led to this master's research project by Yarrick, and Yarrick was looking at the feeding, the breeding behaviour, but specifically the feeding frequency of swifts, because it was thought that Ireland, the weather's not great in the summer, you know, they need all this summer continental weather. But Yarrick's research showed, in fact, that the west of Ireland is brilliant for swifts, and there is plenty food, and the fledging time is around 42 days, and that's the average in Europe. What he also found was that he analysed about 40,000 hours of video recordings from the project in Castlebar, which we live stream and we record activity from that project. So he found that there's 2 peaks of feeding. There's one peak at around 5 in the morning, when the adults go out and they get one food collection of food for the chicks. They go in and feed them, and then they all go back to bed for a while, and then they start feeding them actively from about 9 o'clock. But at 10 o'clock at night, you get this big emergence of insects, which fishermen will know about. There's a thing called the evening rise, and they'll go out and they'll get a big feed around 10 o'clock at night. And that's why they end up going into the nest site when it's dusk, when it's kind of nearly dark. So that project at ATU has evolved. We've got 18 nest sites. We've actually upgraded the cameras so that they're all going to be high definition. We have a large data bank of recordings for research projects. So there's a lot of material there. I think it's the biggest collection of recordings and data for swifts in Europe. So it will be very interesting to see how the swifts will take to the new cameras. We'll get some great views. The other development at ATU is that we're hosting the 8th International Swift Conference in the Mayo Campus. If you can find information on swiftsmayo2026.ie. We are very close to closing registration because we have a ceiling and we've already got 160 applicants from 16 countries. So it's going to be quite an event. I just want to encourage you to say Nestbox project works for swifts. So when I started work for swifts in Mayo, it was 2012. We did our first county survey in 2014. So that was the first time any county in Ireland had been surveyed for nest sites. We had 184 natural nest sites. We had 2 Nestbox projects set up, but we hadn't, we'd only got 2 occupancy. In 2024, we had 191 natural nest sites, but we had 116 occupied Nestbox sites. So we have increased the population of breeding swifts in Mayo by about 30%. So we've now got 307 occupied. We've actually got more because in 2025 it increased. So really the message is that nest boxes work. These swifts seem to prefer the built-in nest boxes because that matches more what they're used to as a natural nest. So I just want to encourage everyone, to give, to put some effort into swifts, because if you get the right formula, the right model of box, the call system, once you have your colony established, if you have like at the swimming pool in Castlebar and at ATU, we don't need to play the calls anymore because they generate their own calls. You can find more information. I've got a website, Swift Conservation Ireland. There's a YouTube channel with some interesting videos. There's a very good Action for Swifts blogspot, Swift Conservation website run by Edward Mayer in the UK. There's Common Swifts Worldwide. And if you're interested, if you want any booklets, the We Are Swifts booklet from me, you can just email me or visit the Swift Conservation Ireland website, and then you'll find my email address there. And I have a booklet which gives advice on how to build nest boxes into new buildings, just what are the steps to follow. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting.
Very much, Lynda. That was great. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
Didn't know, like as you said, when you went through the birds, I thought I was quite good at recognizing my birds, but it was nice that you kind of made the differentiation between the nests as well, and how the different birds nest, which is great. And great to know the swifts are very tidy as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
they're a good tidy
it's a good sell,
bird.
for putting in a swift box when there's not going to be any mess.
Yes.
We have a Q&A feature on this webinar. I'm not sure if people have seen that, any of the attendees. Does anybody have any questions for Lynda at the moment? No, I might give people a minute or two to think about it. I just had one myself, Lynda. Just you said at the beginning that the Swift is red listed but not fully protected in Ireland. Is there is the biggest threat to it, I suppose, the nesting sites, or is there other kind of issues at play there?
Yeah, I think in Ireland it's certainly the nest site, destruction of nest sites. I mean, what we've done in Mayo, I think, is a pretty strong indicator that if you provide the nest sites, you will get the birds. And because Yarrick did his research on the feeding frequency, we know that there's plenty of food available for the birds, because if we felt there was a shortage of insects, then you would be worried about providing nest sites for birds when there isn't enough food. I think that we have to be very mindful about use of pesticides and insecticides and so on in Ireland. We have a good enough insect population at the moment, and we just don't want that to decrease, because there's not only swifts, we've got all the hirundines, the swallows and so on. I have seen a very disturbing practice more and more in Mayo, where Teagasc is encouraging farmers to reseed, you know, to reseed with ryegrass. But in order to do that, they are encouraged to spray the whole field with glyphosate to kill everything. And that is done at the time when that's done at the time when the birds are breeding. So I find that quite disturbing, really, that we're doing that. I feel that a monoculture of ryegrass is not very great anyway. But I do think we need to be very, very mindful about keeping as many midges as possible for the swifts.
Great, thanks for that, Lynda. I just check and see.
I can't see any questions there. I think I've stunned everybody.
Left them speechless. There's a lot to mull over, I suppose. What I know, Lynda, you provided loads of information there as well. I suppose as well, just for modern buildings, I know you said some buildings they will nest in them, and it's kind of a natural nest. I suppose a lot of what your work would be doing, you'd be working with more new builds and things like that for putting in Swift boxes. But I suppose for, the buildings in between, they're not quite old buildings, they've been around for a while. Like, is the best thing probably those external Swift boxes?
Yeah, if you've got an existing building, and you're not building, some people are starting to put Swift boxes in their homes when they're adding on an extension or a new build. The external boxes work very well, extremely well. It's just that you have to be mindful that the swifts, want to nest there long term, and that's the main thing to bear in mind. And so I would encourage people to put up Swift nest boxes if they're interested, because all the people that put them up find it very exciting. The swifts are a very exciting bird. They're here a short amount of time. They're that kind of sound of summer. So I always encourage people to give swifts a go, because they are the one bird that you can attract using an attraction call. It's quite difficult to help swallows, because you can provide nest cups in outbuildings, but you can't make them go in the outbuilding. And house martins, again, you can provide nest cups with calls, but there's some success, but it's not like the swifts. So they're well worth helping.
Perfect.
They're a great community project, actually, for schools and things.
Oh yeah. I can see that. All right. We actually, sorry, we do have a Q&A question. I just seen one come in there from Jonathan. Are there any externally mounted boxes that are suitable for heritage sites? He's responsible for the maintenance of an 800-odd-year-old cathedral with biodiversity initiatives ongoing, but strapping concrete boxes to the exterior is challenging from a heritage perspective.
Yeah, okay, I understand that question. Yeah, for conservation buildings. So I have got nest boxes on a couple of conservation buildings, heritage buildings, and the nest box that we tend to use is the Schwegler nest box, because it fits on with brackets. So you're only drilling 4 holes, two screws each side. and that's removable as well. So the Schwegler box comes in a triple compartment, but it also comes in a single compartment as well. If you are setting up a nest box project for Swifts, they are colonial. So I normally say 6 nest compartments is minimum. So 2 Schwegler nest boxes would work well. And you can get that Schwegler 17A, which is the one I'm talking about from Quick Crop. And if Jonathan wanted to email me, I can give him some examples of conservation buildings where we've used that nest box, because it's not a permanent, and you're not making a lot of, you're not doing a lot of drilling into the building.
Yeah, to damage externally to the building. Perfect. And there's one more question there as well, I see from Brian. Are there any towns or places doing particularly well with Swift conservation?
In Ireland, yeah, there's quite a lot actually. The Swifts are extremely popular. I have to say that Castlebar is doing very well, because we've got 4 projects there now, but there's an increasing number of towns. There are some towns over in County Kildare that are doing well, and so it's hard to pick out a town. It's just such a growing success now. Ballina is another place. The one school where we built in 24 boxes, within 3 years, we have 18 of those are occupied by Swifts. They absolutely love they love. If the Department of Education would say every new school should have Swift boxes built into the new building, with a call system, I could retire, because there'd be plenty.
There'd be enough Swift boxes there then, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any questions? I think that is everything. Sorry, I was just getting used to the Q&A, so I missed Brian's one first, but we got them all in the end, I think.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much to everybody, and thanks for inviting me along. And yeah, that's great.
Perfect. Thanks, Lynda. Your talk was wonderful, and thanks for sharing information as well, just about the refarm project as well, what you've done with that so far. So that was great to see as well for us, I suppose, but just it's great to see the good work that you're doing. It's very interesting talk, so we really appreciate it. And I just want to say thanks to everyone again for attending the webinar. And we appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.